Hello, elevator community. Welcome to the Elevator Entrepreneur Podcast. My mission is to empower my fellow elevator entrepreneurs in creating your growth plan, which is going to free your time, allowing you to rest easy. I'm your host, Sean Madden. I've had an amazing 35 years in the elevator industry, starting out in the field, managed several elevator companies, started, built, and sold Madden Elevator Company for well over market value, and serving as your NAC president. I've done a lot in the industry, and now I'm ready to pay my knowledge forward. Let's dive right in. Hello, welcome Don Gelestino to the Elevator Entrepreneur Podcast. I'm really excited for you to be here and looking forward to have a conversation with you about your journey in the industry. So would you mind starting out by telling us a little bit about how you got in the elevator industry and what your journey has been up to now?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Sean, for having me. I really appreciate this opportunity, and hopefully a couple of young entrepreneurs in the elevator business get something out of it. So for me, I started right out of high school. I was a little bit wild when I was a kid. I had really long hair. Used to play in all rock and roll bands. Lived up in Maine. And then I decided one day to hitchhike down to New York to become a rock star. And I ended up basically homeless. And I slept on the couch with a couple of guys. They used to like to hang out with me because I was running around with a guitar trying to play in bands. And one guy was a bouncer. He wanted to follow because the girls were there. And the other roommate was a drinker. And if you were with the band, you drank for free. So what better guy to be with than the rock and roll bass player? They gave me the opportunity to live on their couch versus the streets. But after 3 months, one morning, I was dead asleep. They shook me and said, "You got to come to work with us." And I said, "What do you guys do?" I thought you were a professional drinker and you like the girls. They said, "Our father owns an elevator company and we need a helper." And I got to tell you, I was so tired. I remember the first thing I thought was, which is the elevator, which is the escalator? I remember that's how out of it I was. Next thing I was in the van. The next thing I was doing a cable job, 110 Lennox Road. I'll never forget it, Brooklyn, New York. Wow. And that was in 1986. Now in my 38th year in the business. I had another company. I started in 93. I sold that to United Technologies in 2010. The big corporate thing is not for me. I have no education. High school diploma was my biggest education. So, the big acronyms in the UTC world wasn't for me. So I stayed there for 3 years. I had 2 years left on a no-compete. After that was up, I started Champion Elevator, which was 8 years ago. And I have such a great team here and I love what I do. So that helps everything.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, what a journey. I knew some of that. I didn't know all of that. I definitely didn't know you were almost homeless. So that was an interesting part of the story. So it's always fun to me to hear people's journey and their story and where they came from and how they got in the industry. Because my dad was in the military. And he got out in New York and he had a friend that worked at Otis. That's how he ended up getting in the industry. And back in the day, you had to know somebody or you couldn't even get in.
Yeah. It's an industry that people don't see it or hear it every day. Like you see a policeman, you see a fireman, you see the mailman. It's not like you see elevated people. They're not called out, right? So if you don't live in a building, you maybe never even heard of an elevator guy. I came from the suburbs, never heard of it my whole life until I was being dragged off a couch to go become one.
That's an awesome story. Well, Don, you've been through a lot of stuff, having a couple of businesses, and I know you were on the board and president of NAC not too long ago. What's some business challenge that you had, and how did you deal with that? Let's talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, this may lead to some of the best advice I think I could possibly give to anyone because it was something I didn't know. So I love to share. One of my biggest challenges was probably back in 2001. I had this company, Vertec, and we were doing amazing. We were just a great company. We didn't really know anything about finance, so we would take a part that cost $100 and we'd take labor that cost $100 and we'd mark it up 30%. We'd say, yeah, we're making 30% on the job, and we would put a proposal out there, and boom, it would come back immediately. And we were like, yeah, that's great. And we'd send another and another. And every proposal we signed came back, and we got more elevators on service. And then what happened? We were getting tighter and tighter, and we didn't know what's going on, and we must have to collect money fast, everything. And at the end of the day, we ended up calling it a business consultant firm. We couldn't figure it out. Like, we were doing great and everything was good. Every job we bid on, we got a proposal. Like, how could you be tight money wise? And we thought it was, we're not collecting fast enough, or insurance is too high. We really didn't know what we were talking about financially. And then these consultants dug through every single bit of our business. And they said, Don, you guys are doing great, but the more work you do, the faster you're putting yourself out of business. And me and my partner looked at each other and we were like, what are you talking about? And the problem was, it was that $100 for the part, $100 for the labor, but we needed 32% just for the overhead. Then we needed 30% markup. So I got to tell you, it was like I saw a ghost, because I knew all the backlog we had was basically unprofitable, and we had a lot of it. And then we had to figure out how to dig out from that mess. You know, the scary thing was, the guy told us, you're going to have to raise all your maintenance prices, and you're going to have to go up on your proposals. And me and my partner were like, we can't do that. People are going to leave. We'll never get another job again. And I will say, we were scared and everything, but the guy told us, you're going to go out of business if you don't. And I'll never forget it. We took an elevator maintenance contract and we raised the price, something that we would deem unrealistic. And not one customer, not one, canceled the contract. And we were like, oh boy, I think God was working with us a little bit. And then we got through the backlog of unprofitable work. And going forward, we made sure we had the correct overhead amount in our jobs. And I'll tell you, the rest of our career, it was much better after we set that problem. And that's a thing where, if you're an elevator person, and you know, a lot of elevator people, they didn't go to school for finance, then become an elevator person. That's something that could sneak by you, and you could go out there with every intention of being the best service provider. You have to know that information.
Yeah. It sounds like your customers already knew that you were way undercharging them. So that's why they didn't push back too much, because they were like, yeah, this is a great deal. And they probably figured they could get away with it for a little bit until somebody finds out, or you all grew to where you had to have more margin to cover your overhead. But that's a really good point, because I had some of those issues early on, and I had to teach a lot of people those things. The difference in markup and margin, that's a significant difference. And if you're not covering that overhead and really know what your overhead is, a lot of times people don't know because they don't take the time to calculate it. But it's a really, really important number. And it's probably what saved my business several times, really knowing what my bottom line was, what my break even is, and then what the industry will allow you to charge in your market so that you can fix problems like, oh, we underestimated this one job because we got too much labor or something like that. So that's a great key point. I really appreciate that a lot.
Yeah, I think that when I say every day, we as elevator people had so many challenges between customer service and materials and everything that comes and goes, safety and insurance. So the ups and downs are enough of a job for a new entrepreneur to go kickstart one of these types of companies. But when you factor in just a few little bad ingredients, like not knowing your overhead, I gotta tell you, it makes the whole soup a different soup if you don't have that ingredient. Yeah.
And it's been my experience that most elevator entrepreneurs are elevator guys. They got tired of the hustle and bustle, not taking care of the customer, not taking care of the employees, and they just jump out there and we're going to figure this out. And by doing a good job, working hard, you can grow to a certain point before you start having to hire people. And then that's where the struggle comes, because they don't have that background experience with the finance. Talk a little more about that. Did you go through that in your business? Obviously, you did with the margin and markup, but there's so much on the finance side. Like, I had an issue with cash flow. I had to learn everything there was about cash flow and how I could build a cash flow plan and what WIP was and how over and under billing worked. And there's a lot to it. And if you don't know, then you're at risk. You ever had any of those situations or challenges?
Yeah, plenty of time. So I did the same thing like you. Like I built cash flow forecasts when I was learning Excel back in the early 2000s, and that's great because you build a model and then you really have to check it and reconcile out everything every month and see where you are, what's high and why is it high. You gotta make sure you're not talking yourself into, oh, that's
Mhm.
high because we did this big fundraiser. Because you could talk yourself into
Yep.
literally blowing a plan. And you'll give yourself the thumbs up the whole way till the end of the year when you like, what do you mean we lost money? And then your
Yeah.
accountant will tell you, it's okay if you lost money. You don't want to pay taxes or something stupid.
Yeah.
Like, let me tell you, the world can get really weird. When you're building a plan, you have to stay true to the plan and execute and see it through. When you're a young entrepreneur with a smaller business, it's easier to keep a handle on it if you have controlled growth where you're doing, I don't want to call it baby steps because I don't want people to think
Right.
it's baby steps. There's no part of the elevator business that's really baby steps, but you could grow too fast. And if you grow too fast, then you're going to need a real professional to take that plan and run that plan for you. That's where you start to say, what hat is the best hat for me as the entrepreneur to wear? I have friends that are in the business the same 38 years as me. They own their own companies and they're out there fixing elevators every day. I have
Mhm.
other guys in the business that are running their companies and they have managers. That's what I have. And I have other guys that are running their company in a totally different manner than
Yeah.
the other two. So you have to pick a lane if you're going to grow fast, because if you start growing too fast, you really have to stay on that plan. And that could be a full-time job because, like you said, once you introduce schedule, when you're watching cash flow in New York, cash flow is crazy. These people at 120 think they're paying on time. But they're like, what do you mean I'm only 3 months behind? I'm like, dude, that's a quarter of a year. And that gets, to that, they got a building, they spend $1.6 million a month just in expenses. They're like, why are you crying about $500 elevator maintenance bill? The reality is you really need someone to manage that. And you have to have a good person. Don't go out and hire your brother-in-law because he had a calculator on his desk when the day I met him. Like, that's not a good answer. You got to have the right people.
Yeah. That's very important. It's funny you mentioned about finding your lane because that's a key point to any entrepreneur, but in the elevator industry, especially if you come up through the field, you got to make a decision. Are you going to keep working on elevators? You want to be a manager? Do you want to be a leader? You want to be a visionary? You can choose to do anything you want. And then you have to surround yourself with good people in those other positions, give them guidance, but let them run and grow. And I made a lot of mistakes sometimes trying to figure everything out on my own and trying to do everything on my own, and then something's going to fail, right? Because there's no way you can do it all. So you really got to find the right people to put in the places to surround you, that the things you either don't want to do or you're not good at, then find the things you're good at that you like doing and spend time there and grow your business that way.
It's also part of your personality, like, but you got to have a reality check going on because there's some guys so great at being a mechanic,
Mhm.
and then they want to be the sales guy, and so now they're going to be a sales guy, but they really don't have that sales thing, or maybe you're not a great mechanic, but you're better at selling. Like, so you have to be fit for the job. You got to find your lane because it's a long-term decision, right? The more you flip and flop, just the longer it's going to take for your company to get up to flying altitude and then fly. If you're in the field for 6 months and then you're going to try to sales, and then you're like, oh, the CFO is terrible. I'm going to go be the CFO and I'll get a sales guy. Like, you could do that. And I'll tell you the truth, you're going to be in business 5 years and you might not get anywhere, which is very frustrating. You might say, I was better off when I had the job and go back to work, all this, whatever. But
Yeah.
the issue is, it's a lot of little pieces that have to come together to run any business. I don't know if I'm impartial to just say in the elevator business, on top of it, it's not a candy store. When you're dealing with the riding public and you're dealing with employee safety and you're dealing with deadlines and unions, I mean, there is so much that you have to make sure you're checking 1,000 boxes a day, and all of them got to check. You choose whatever type of person you are. You just have to really be true to that whole thing, and then just run your mission straight out. And that's the best
Yeah.
advice I got.
Oh, that's great advice. I used to tell people all the time, we are the master and the jack of all trades because people ride on what we do. We have people's lives in our hands every day. And I think that changed people's mentality when they started thinking about part of what I do in an elevator business. I actually affect people's lives every day. And it's true. To your point of when you're an elevator entrepreneur and you come up and you decide you've been in the field and you can sell anything, and then you want to go do sales, it's two totally different things. Like if you're in front of the customer and you're fixing a problem and you see a problem and you can show them, that's not really sales. It is sales, but you're in the field and you're the trusted one. When you're actually a
Yes.
salesperson, you put the sales hat on, that's a whole different ballgame because they automatically don't want to talk to you when you walk in because they sometimes think you're just trying to sell them something. So it's a whole different world. I learned that the hard way myself.
And then you got the whole managing people side of it. I mean, managing people is not a thing for everyone.
Right.
It's a whole different skill set. It's great when you're running your own schedule and when you're going and you do one or two jobs a day and you're servicing a few elevators and you're running your own schedule. But when you start implementing different people to different routes, and then you got HR things you have to roll out, you have to manage that. And it's a real interesting way of life to manage people. I've had a lot of conversations with technicians that are like, I want to get out of the field and run the people. And I'm like, oh, you got to do that with kid gloves because there's not enough great people out there. So if you get one or two of them to come out and work with you as a startup, you're going to have to make sure you handle all of those moves correctly.
Yeah. Well, we could sit here and talk for hours. Elevator people always do, but
Yeah.
some great insights, Don, for sure. What's one thing that you would like to leave our fellow entrepreneurs with? What's one thing you think that would be earth shattering that you could really say, man, this is the thing that they should consider thinking about?
The one thing I would say is you should be friends with your competition and try to help each other the best you can and all join into different associations and become all part of the community because the reality is everybody in the business is trying to do the same thing. Everyone has a different flavor, everyone has a different style. At the end of the day, that competitor of yours is in the same boat, waking up, doing the same thing. And believe me, we have tons of products in our shop. I gotta tell you, I lent products out of it. People use my vehicles if they're stuck. I've rigged stuff. People, I feel like there's enough work that you don't have to fight in your competition. We're not all gonna win the game, right? Like, how boring would it be if we went to a Yankees game like New York Yankees, right? If we knew they were going to win every game in 2 years, there'd be no one in the stands anymore.
Yeah.
It'd be boring, right? At the end of the
Right.
day, we could all be a like-minded community and we can compete. We're not going to get all the jobs, but if you're good at what you do, you can actually work with a community of competitors and get great things done. I'll tell you, that was what was great about being part of the NAEC. And that's why I recommend everybody join because
Yeah.
you're sitting with people that are like-minded, discussing issues. Even to this day, I may get a call from somebody out in the Midwest. Don, you have this board, you have that, or how do you handle this? And you know what? We talk just like I would talk to a guy right across the street from my job right here in New York. Life is too short not to help each other out, especially someone that's trying to do the exact same thing that we're trying to do.
That's amazing advice, Don. I don't think everyone holds that sentiment, but I certainly try to. We're all out here to take care of the riding public and provide them a safe and reliable elevator. And we've had situations where I've had people come borrow weights to do a test. Obviously, you can't share labor, but there's situations that you can help each other out. And like you said, you're not going to win them all, but we're all in the game to do the same thing, take care of the riding public, make elevators safe, and do a good job for the clients. When companies fall into that scenario and they just need extra support, that's a great advice to reach out to your competitor and say, I got a situation. There's some way you can help me with it. Because we all have had those challenges. So that's really great insights, Don. Well, I appreciate you joining this podcast. and great insights, great inputs. Appreciate everything you do for the industry. Appreciate you being on the board and serving as a president of NAC and being part of committees. And we keep dragging you into a lot more of that, but it's great stuff because you get so much out of it. I've really enjoyed it, but I appreciate everything done, and you have a great day.
You too. Thanks a lot. Be well.
Thank you for listening to the Elevator Entrepreneur podcast. I truly hope this information helps my fellow elevator entrepreneurs to build your growth plan so you can free your time, allowing you to rest easy. If you need help getting your elevator business organized for growth, I've created tools and templates inside my favorite business operating system that you can access for free. Plus, you can have a 30-day free trial of the software. Just head over to elevatorstrategichub.com/ebos. That's /EBOS to get your free access, or you can click the link below. Thanks again. I'll be back next time with a brand new episode on the Elevator Entrepreneur. Until next time, stay safe out there, and I will continue to empower my fellow elevator entrepreneurs.